Welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. In this podcast, we discuss mystical works of literature and how they relate to recovery. We hope you enjoy today's podcast episode.
Hello, this is Buddy C. Welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. Today we have Brian and Drew. Good to have you guys. For those new to the podcast, we talk about how Taoist principles relate to recovery. I think we're all in different recovery for different addictions. We all practice some form of 12-step, though, as part of our recovery. What I found was I am not a Taoist. I did not have to turn in my Jesus card for me to see how this works in the practicality. What I have found Taoist thought to be, not Taoist religion, but to really be how God works. This is, if you believe that God is love, this is how love is seen in the world, is the way I'm beginning to see what this is. So it's not a belief system, it's how the action looks of compassionate living, how that really looks in application. You're not sinning by watching the Tao podcast, by listening to the Tao podcast, or applying these things. It's not that kind of, it's not a belief system. It's a way to notice how love works in our lives, how compassion works, because that's the primary book we've studied is the Tao Te Ching, which is loosely translated, the way of virtue is what it's, Te is virtue, Te, so it's the book of the path of virtues. The underlying principle behind all of what we study or look at in this podcast is how virtue works in our life, and that virtue is the thread that we can see through all of nature as far as we're concerned. Now, how do I see that in recovery? Page 552 in the fourth edition's a great example of that, fourth edition of the big book, that when we resent someone, what do? We pray for them. If we think it's empty words, don't think it'll work, we do it anyway. That's the thread of virtue, that you're injecting virtue into the situation. Some form of compassion. Simplest way for me to do that in everyday life is, how can I be helpful? It may be a difficult situation. I had a situation this week, work-related, and I had all this stuff in my head about how it was going to go and what I was going to do and all that. I said, wait a minute. Let me just start this with that thread of virtue. So I talked about the things I appreciated in the person. And the discussion went a totally different way, as usual, than what I was anticipating in my head, which is great. But that would have went way off if I wouldn't have decided in the beginning to take a contrary action, which would be, how can I get compassion? How can I get helpfulness? How can I get love in some form into this situation? And that works for me every time. Just try it next time. If you're having a confrontation, is there something you can find gratitude in that person? If so, let them know how you're grateful for them. You don't have to say it in those words. You can say it in a non-spiritual manner and just see where the conversation goes. See if it doesn't lighten and lift the conversation somewhat. So that's what we're talking about, is how virtue works, how God works, all those words you want to put on that. Okay, a benefit that we have at buddyc.org, we have a whole list of podcasts there under resources that you can use that give you some variety if you're looking for different recovery podcasts. These are ones that I enjoy. and then others that we have there. So take a look at that, and maybe some of those will benefit you. We also have some podcasts that are non-recovery that are Tao related. So we have a couple of them as well. Okay. Our story out of the Chuang Tzu today is pages 40 and 41, Great Knowledge. Drew, you going to read for us, sir?
Sure. Great knowledge sees all in one. Small knowledge breaks down into the many. When the body sleeps, the soul is enfolded in one. When the body wakes, the openings begin to function. They resound with every encounter, with all the varied business of life, the strivings of the heart. Men are blocked, perplexed, lost in doubt. Little fears eat away their peace of heart. Great fears swallow them whole. Arrows shot at a target, hit and miss, right and wrong. That is what men call judgment, decision. Their pronouncements are as final as treaties between emperors. Oh, they make their point. Yet their arguments fall faster and feebler than dead leaves in autumn and winter. Their talks flow out like piss, never to be recovered. They stand at last, blocked, bound, and gagged, choked up like old drain pipes. The mind fails. It shall not see light again. Pleasure and rage, sadness and joy, hopes and regrets, change and stability, weakness and decision, impatience and sloth. All are sounds from the same flute, all mushrooms from the same wet mold. Day and night follow one another and come upon us without our seeing how they sprout. Enough, enough. Early and late we meet the that from which these all grow. If there were no that, there would be no this. If there were no this, there would be nothing for all these winds to play on. So far can we go, but how shall we understand what brings it about? One may well suppose the true governor to be behind it all. That such a power works, I can believe. I cannot see his form. He acts, but has no form.
Thank you, Drew. Well, that sounds very dry. Let's see what comes of it when we just approach it with an open mind. Reminds me of one of the traditions in AA, Tradition 12. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us, this is the part, to place principles before personalities. If I'm stuck on the words that are here, I may not see anything out of this. But can I be open to looking past the words, what's in between the letters, what's in between the sentences, and look at this with an open heart? Because it's really an analogy for all of life, because I am so quick to judge by outward appearance or judge by my past perceptions that if I do that, I will miss the gift. Because when someone starts talking in the past, and what I'm learning not to do is I'll go ahead and put them in a box and I've got them figured out and they're over here. When if I just look with an open heart and ask the question that I try to ask often, how can I see this differently? I can do that for a person. I can do that for a situation. So let's take this with an open heart, an open mind. It's not lost that the title is Great Knowledge, because that's what we're talking about, in that if I think I have things figured out and I already have great knowledge, I'm going to, why in the world would I want to read this or look at it any closer? So let's look at it with an open mind, open heart, and see what these words are pointing toward, because they're just the moon. The saying, the finger pointing at the moon, these words are not the moon. These words are the finger point. They're pointing at something. So let's see if we can notice what they're pointing toward. So we'll start at the beginning. Great knowledge. So we've got two kinds of knowledge. Great knowledge sees all in one. Small knowledge breaks down into the many. Y'all stop me as you have something. When the body sleeps, the soul is enfolded into one. When the body wakes, the openings begin to function. You've got great knowledge, and then you've got small knowledge. They resound with every encounter, with all the varied business of life, the strivings of the heart. Men are blocked, perplexed, lost in doubt. Lost in doubt. Little fears eat away their peace of heart. Great fears swallow them whole. So they're full of fear, which we find in recovery that all of our character defects that we start to see from the fourth and fifth step, all of mine had a root in fear. Everyone I've ever worked with and gone through the steps, the very same thing. Every outward action that I would see as a defective character or a negative that I no longer wish to do has a root in fear every time, every anger, every resentment, every selfishness, bit of selfishness, every dishonest act has a root of fear. So little fears eat away at their peace of heart. Arrows shot at a target hit and miss, right and wrong. That is what men call judgment, decision. So judgment and decisions that we make are like arrows shot at a target. Some hit and some miss, some are right, some are wrong. Okay. Their pronouncements are as final. For me, that would mean when I make a decision, how often I believe that decision is final when a day, 2 days, or whenever later, I realize how incorrect that decision was.
That's always pretty tough to swallow, ain't it, buddy?
Yeah. And it's usually fear based. I'm making a decision. When I'm making a decision, what is my motivation for that decision? Is my motivation fear? Is it coming from that foundation of fear or compassion? Because they're all coming from one of the two. And I had an employee one time that made me a lot of money, so I let her get away with things that I shouldn't have let her get away with because she was making me money. So the reason I wouldn't treat her like everyone else was because I was afraid that I would lose the money that she was making for me. So when it finally got bad enough, I fired her, and I don't recall a big difference. It was made up in other ways and those things. Definitely was not worth the compromise for me to keep her. So that's, for me, that would be an example of that. As treaties between emperors, so these are treaties between two emperors, they make their point, yet their arguments fall faster and feebler. Their arguments fall faster and feebler than dead leaves in autumn and winter. Their talks flow out like piss, never to be recovered. They stand at last, blocked, bound, and gagged, choked up like old drain pipes. The mind fails. It shall not see light again. How depressing.
Yeah. Yeah, buddy. For me, that whole stanza is about the difference between living in stillness and living in being caught up in the self, the soul being enfolded into one. I think that's speaking to, when we're asleep, we're not thinking about ourselves. We're not putting ourselves first. Our minds are still. I think that's what it's trying to say is when your mind isn't still, when you're all caught up in the varied business of life, strivings of the heart, I don't think that means selfless heart. I'd take that to be strivings of the self. When you're caught up in your desires, your attachments, your fears, your resentments, your judgments, then you become blocked, you become perplexed, lost in doubt, lose the peace that's in your heart. You get swallowed up by big fears. You get fixated on hitting and missing, what's right and what's wrong. That's not a very peaceful way to live. I don't want to live like in those few lines right there. And even if I do, then whatever I'm fixated on falls away really quickly and doesn't last any longer than the moment anyway. And like the last few lines, I've choked up my mind with all this garbage, and now it's all filled up, choked up like the old drain pipes. I think this whole stanza is telling you what life is like when you're not living in stillness. When you're not putting love first, when you're not putting virtue first. This is what your life becomes like.
Thank you, Drew. So the treaties between emperors, that's all head knowledge. That's all fear-based.
Yeah, pronouncements are as final as treaties between emperors. That's like you were saying. Whenever I declare something to be, that's the way it is. This is true. This is how it's going to be. To me, that's as unbreakable, as unchangeable as you might as well try changing treaties that emperors have agreed to. Good luck with that.
And the result is absolute waste, blocked, bound, and gagged. And when the mind fails, the very last things, so we're back to the mind again. So these are, as much as we try to figure this out mentally, the more we do, probably the more bound we are. All right. We can come back. Let's move to the positive here. Or maybe not. Pleasure and rage, sadness and joy, hope and regrets, change and stability, weakness and decision, impatience and sloth. All are sounds from the same flute, all mushrooms from the same wet mold. Day and night follow one another and come upon us without our seeing how they sprout. All these extremes are more of the great knowledge that all this comes upon us without us seeing how it happens. If we're caught up in our head and we're not open-minded and we think we have this thing figured out, we're going to continue to have these extremes that we don't understand. Much like in recovery, when I came in, I couldn't understand why God would not answer my prayer. I prayed the hardest I ever prayed in life before I got sober because I thought God was going to help me with this. I was up in my head. There was no surrender in that. There was no letting go. There was no, how do I step out of the way and allow this to be handled for me? Which in Taoist speak, that would be Wu Wei. We didn't understand how this happened. For me, how did I become an alcoholic? How did that happen? I don't understand. I'm a nice person. I try to serve God as best I can. I don't deserve this. As a friend of mine would say, I had the emphasis on the wrong syllable, right?
Mm.
I thought God helped me. God doesn't help me. I have to take actions that introduce God into the situation or love into the situation. That's how it works for me. I have to take action. My belief doesn't matter. What matters is what action I take. I can believe all day long, but until I take the action, and the action may be more before you ride the roller coaster, First, you have to stand through the line. If it's a good one, you sit down, you buckle up. Maybe the actions we take more than making the roller coaster run is getting ready or the buckle up or the other things. Because if we don't do those things, of course, the roller coaster is gonna harm us. So it's not. I always thought my job was to push the roller coaster, but it's not. I'd try to push the roller coaster and never get in. I was out there in danger on the tracks trying to push this thing I couldn't push. But that real, in hindsight, does that resonate for y'all? Because that was the way that it happened for me. I said, oh, I still had a job. Instead of trying to push, my job now was to allow myself first get in line, allow just trust the process, and then allow myself to get buckled in. There's someone who always comes and checks. You don't tell the person, screw off. I know what I'm doing. I buckled myself. No, they check everything. You have to allow that. You're liking this one, aren't you, Brian? I can tell.
Honestly, it's where I was yesterday afternoon. Yeah. To make a long story short, took my wife's car into the dealer and to have a little issue fixed. That's under warranty. And they called me and said, hey, we got the part on order. And we also recommend all these other services to the tune of about $5,000, which I thought was just absurd. And I just told the guy, I said, man, you can just stop right there because it ain't happening. I'm not going to do all this stuff to a car that has no issues. If it's not broke, you can't fix it. And anyway, man, I had a lot. I went to pick the car. They had to order the parts. I went to pick the car up yesterday, and man, I had a lot of energy in there because I was like, sooner or later, these folks are going to try to hang it off in me. And I was just thinking, I pulled up in the parking lot, and my wife was with me, and I told her, or she said, I'm going to wait right here. And I took that as, I don't want to be in the middle of this. And I said, I'm going to be kind. And she said, I know you are. I'm just going to wait right here. But she was coming from a place, I was already on guard. I had my axe in my sheath and I was ready to walk in there. And so anyway, I walked in there and the guys, hey, I got your paperwork here. He had quite a few papers, and I was like, sooner or later, one of those papers is going to have a number that I don't like. And, but I could tell our energy was like, I was carrying this energy inside. But I recognized that, and I just kept it tamped down. And it ended up just working out. But he's like, hey, he gets to the end. He says, here's your keys, your parts are on order, and we'll call you. It's going to be under warranty. And I was like, man, thank goodness I didn't go in there with this ego. I'm right. Y'all are a bunch of idiots. Yeah, thankfully. Matter of fact, I think I probably need to mention that to my wife after this meeting. She'll find it funny.
Eventually, Brian, if you continue on this path, eventually you'll go and deal with it.
I don't have no choice, buddy. I'm going to.
There'll be no energy there. You won't carry that at all.
Yeah.
When it starts, you'll say, I'm not buying into that. Instead of entertaining it, because that's what happened for me.
Yeah.
Entertaining it, have it all in my head, how it's going to work.
Yeah. It's one of those things like you're fixing to get into my wallet. You're fixing to screw me. And I'm going to sever it right here.
That's my attitude toward car dealers and dealerships and all those things too. So I have to work on that myself. That one's.
Yeah. A big part of my story is one of my grandfathers was a car salesman, and he was abusive, and we were not, I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him. And a lot of stuff around that. So I just have energy around car salesmen. And And to the point, I've been in the dealership with my truck and I see a car salesman walk through and I'm like, look at this guy. And I shouldn't be that way. He's just selling cars, trying to feed his family.
But you're starting to see it though.
Oh yeah, I see it. Yeah,
You see it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it gives me gratitude that I'm not that way anymore.
Can I see
I
this
try
guy
to.
differently? Can
Yeah.
I see this guy differently?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Can I not take his actions of trying to sell personally?
Mm-hmm.
The car dealership's not doing that to you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who owned that vehicle, they would suggest the very same things because they
Mm-hmm.
want to sell more product. They want to sell more stuff. So
Well,
that's what
and
they're doing.
it was what the factory recommends. All that list of stuff they
Oh,
have.
yeah.
They were just going down the list.
Doing their job.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that I cannot think. I can think that way right now.
It's not. This guy looks like a sucker.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
his wife's car. He'll do anything.
I can think that it's not personal at the moment, but
Yeah.
the situation, and I have to be spiritually minded not to get hooked and drawn into that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, enough. Early and late, we meet with that, parenthesis around that, from which these, parenthesis around the, quotations around each, quotations around these, all growl.
Grow.
Is it grow?
Yeah, that's grow with an exclamation mark.
Okay. Man, thank you. All grow. That causes these to grow. If there were no that, there would be no this, or there'd be nothing that's grown. If there were no this, there would be nothing for all these winds to play on, so far as we go. But how shall we understand what brings this about? Let's look at the that and the these. At the moment, could we look at that as our fearful actions, which cause our fear, actually, which causes the fearful actions, which causes all the issues? And he's asking, how does this work? I'm angry. Why am I angry? And can I get rid of this anger? How do I get rid of this anger? So the anger would be a fearful action. So if I take a step back from the anger to the that instead of these, I'm back to the that, which is the fear. And we're learning the program, the tools we use to surrender fear. The big one we mentioned earlier, 552, whatever we're angry at or about, usually a person. I pray for them. I don't even pray for myself anymore. So praying for them, does it make them, their life better? No, but it changes me. It's a way I can surrender. I can look at them differently. The other thing that I do is I stop fighting the anger, because we learn that what we resist persists. I found myself resisting anger. I shouldn't be angry at that person. Why am I angry? And I'm fighting the anger. No, I'm trying to push it down like the beach ball under the water. Eventually, that beach ball is going to get away as long as I'm pushing it. I got to stop pushing it down. So how do I stop? If I stop what I always thought was, if I stop pushing against the anger, it's just going to take over. And I'm going to go ballistic if I say it's okay to be angry. But I found that not to be the case. It was my push that gave the anger the energy. Just like I pushed that ball, if I put the more I push the ball underwater, the further it goes down, the more resistance there is. So I'm thinking this ball is going to give this much resistance all the time. So I've got to push harder. But when I stop pushing and allow it to come to the surface, does it keep going up? No, it just stops. So anger seems to work the same way for me. What I learned to do was say, take a moment, sit with it, stillness. I'm angry at whoever. I'm angry at this car dealership before I even get there. I'm angry because I think they're going to screw me. And sit with that for a minute. What happens for me is it starts to dissipate and leave. I don't know how that works, but it does for me. It's worked for me in real life situations. And I've shared those in the past, so I'm not going to do that. But it was that same process. Things I used to get angry at and stay angry at for days that had, or for at least hours, that had no bearing on what was going on at the moment. And when I sat with that and acknowledged it, more times than not, it left. Now, sometimes, though, I have to dig back to the fear that's behind the anger, like I talked about at first. First, I stop resisting it. Then, if that doesn't work, all I want to do as little work as I have to. I do the easiest thing first, right? So I stop resisting it. But if that anger keeps coming back, I've got to do a little more work and dig down as to see what fear is there pushing that anger up. And a lot of times it has nothing to do with what I think it does, or really most times. That's some anger at my accountant because I thought he was going to screw me, but that was because of my fear of financial insecurity because he was going to take something I had. Same.
That last dollar.
Yeah. And that goes back to my fear that I won't have what I need. And that's fear. That's fear. And I've learned and use gratitude, like you were talking about, Brian. Keep that financial gratitude list so I can look and see that I'm always taken care of. Drew?
Yeah, what you were talking about with accepting the anger and watching it go away pretty quickly after trying to fight it away and not being very successful at it. When it comes to recovery, that reminded me of cravings, especially early in recovery. Those were things that I was pretty afraid of and hated to feel. And if I had one that popped up, I'd get angry at myself for it. I'd try to make it go away, fight it really, and that just kept it there, kept it on the front of my mind. And the harder I'd push, the harder it would push back. But over time, I learned if I just sit with it and allow it to be there, allow that feeling to be there, and not fight against it, not judge myself for it, not wish that it wouldn't pop up, be afraid that it might pop up in the future, but just allow it to be there and go about my day, then it usually went away without me even noticing it. And like you said with anger, if I did notice that they just kept popping up pretty regularly, or I'd go about my day and they're just still there, then it was time to look behind what's behind this. There's obviously something inside me really wants to change what's going on in my life. Am I just really bored? Am I not engaging in things that are good for me? Am I worrying too much about something? Am I regretting some things in the past? Am I just acting really selfishly these days? What's going on that's causing my desire to want to escape from the present, from where I am? So that was just what popped up with me in terms of recovery when you were talking about anger right there, is those cravings, just letting them be usually makes them go away. But if it doesn't, then that's a good opportunity to dive a little deeper into something deep inside me telling me that I need to look into to change, to make my life more in line with my values and living that virtuous Taoist life.
Thank you, Drew. Something I neglected to mention, going back to the extremes, the pleasure, rage, sadness, joy, hopes, regrets, change, stability, weakness and decision, impatience and sloth. It says all are sounds from the same flute. In other words, if I think pleasure will give me peace, because it doesn't say peace there, but it does say peace earlier, that the little fears eat away at our peace of heart. So these are just the extremes of emotion a lot, I think. And all of these extremes can have a fear-based root, a fear-based source. In other words, our success or failure can come from fear, or we could just accept success and failure as part of life and not tie our value to it. If I'm pushing, and this sounds so ridiculous, but it's the case, I'm out pushing this beach ball down, and if I can't do it, are other people going to think less of me? Now, it sounds so ridiculous, but in reality, that's what we're talking about. And I'm so concerned about what others think of me that I can react in any direction based from fear, from that fear base, and not realize it's all deceit. That fear, all fear can do is generate more fear. Brian?
Buddy, I was thinking that there's probably people out there that are thinking, man, Buddy's got just a small beach ball that he's holding down. I've got this huge one.
Right.
He's got it. He must have it made.
Yeah.
You know, that comparing my insides to others' outsides.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so easy to do that, and it's hard to allow yourself to let go of that trap. And it's a process. One may well suppose the true governor to be behind it all. That such a power works, I can believe. I cannot see his form. He acts but has no form. I would say that's referring to the Tao.
Mm-hmm.
I've never heard the Tao called the true governor. I don't recall it, but we can go with it. The Tao, or you could say love or compassion. I think love's an overused word. Really, it's acts of compassion is compassionate living is a good way to say it. Let your actions flow through a lens of compassion would be a way to say it. Filter.
I'm 99% sure this isn't why the word governor was used, but it brought to my mind a governor in an engine.
Mm-hmm.
Not a leader, person governor, but a governor in an engine is something that keeps things from going so far that they break, that they fall apart, it keeps things within their healthy limits. Like I said, I don't think that's what this governor is supposed to be, but I think it works. The Tao being something that keeps everything, within its limits, keeps everything from going so far that it breaks down. Maybe it was all that car talk that got it into my mind.
But
Yeah.
that's probably why you call that a governor, is for the very same reason. It's there to control, to restrict, to keep from getting the motor getting beyond safe limits. So I've been on my motorcycle and the governor kicked in. I'm like, what is this? I need to go faster. I was kicked in about 125. Had no need going that fast, much less faster. I remember the first time I was headed to Colorado, and we've got all those plains and scrub before you get there that's all flat, which I had no idea I thought all Colorado was mountains before. I was like, there's nobody in sight in any direction. I got a radar and all that on the motorcycle. I said, I'm just going to see what this thing will do. So I opened it up and it just ran up to 125. I drove a 1200 RT BMWs, and that thing got up just quick. And then I had a moment of clarity. If I were to bounce off this road, it would be months before anyone found me. There's nothing. I better slow down.
You're not supposed to say you're in Colorado. You're supposed to, like the YouTubers that are doing racing. This is somewhere in Mexico.
Yeah. We have a stretch of road here that has it's a new 4-lane, so there's no entrance and exits. So we'll put a guy at one end and a guy at the other end, and then we can race it as much as we want to, as long as and it's about a 2-mile stretch. And take our bags off and all of that and see what we can do. Yeah, I had my sponsor on one end. He says, I don't know why I'm here. No police ever come through here. And all of a sudden, while we were taking off, this a deputy came by. And he was like, he's trying to get his phone out and do all. Fortunately, he didn't follow up. He kept going and didn't turn. But yeah, it was funny. All right. It is a form of control, though, and we have to allow that control. If I think I have it figured out, I'm not going to even consider this. It says he acts and has no form. We know all this comes from emptiness. The wheel, what makes the wheel useful is the hole in the center, the emptiness that the wheel has. And this is the same thing. If our usefulness comes from emptiness, part of that is us having this idea that maybe we don't have this figured out. Am I really taking compassionate action rather than fearful action? What am I responding or am I reacting? All those different analogies we could put on it. And not judge ourselves by our actions or emotions or our thoughts. Because when we act on those things, like you were talking about at the car dealership, Brian, Oscar's an hour late. He did this last year.
Probably.
I think he did. Let's let him in.
Go easy on him, buddy.
Oscar, good to see you today, sir.
Good to see you, gentlemen.
Maybe you need to check your Eastern time next week.
Damn it, it's again. It's
You did it last year, didn't you? You did it last year, I think. That's funny. We just had a fantastic conversation, Oscar. I'm sorry you missed it.
It's not a problem. I listen to it. When I'm not in it, I'll always listen to it and enjoy it very much. So that's great.
We would have enjoyed your comments. Maybe you can make them next week.
Yeah, probably. It was
an hour sooner.
I read the verse, and it's a very nice verse.
Yes.
It is. Uh-huh.
Yeah, beautiful.
Once we got to looking at it, because at first it was, like these have been up to now, really, if there's anything here or not. We'll be through this in 10 minutes, and it's up to the hour, and
you're still here.
Finishing up. Yes. But that's anything to share with us, Oscar, before we leave? Because we're fixing to close.
I'm great. So I hope you are all great, and I look forward listening into it.
Yes, thank you. If there's anything else, guys?
No. Just
well, you guys have
Oscar is a good example of living in acceptance.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah, for sure. I try.
Thanks, guys. Y'all have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Right.
Hello, this is Buddy C. I wanted to make you aware of several recovery-related resources that I've posted in the episode description. These resources include a list of recovery podcasts, a free sober meditation app, daily recovery email, shared Google recovery calendars. Hope you put some of these resources to use and have a great week.
Thank you for listening to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends in recovery.